I didn't expect it, of course. I had no idea what was coming.
I feel like there's already so much to do, just in going through life, and keeping things, in order and functioning that I don't really need to add,
This is true. I'm taking a break from touring.
Yeah, for how long?
Well, I don't know how long it'll be. Maybe.
Wembley Stadium, June 1988. 70,000 people waiting. Cameras beaming the moment to hundreds of millions more. And Stevie Wonder's keyboard won't turn on. So they send out a quiet black woman with a guitar and a song about a dead-end job and a car that might be the only way out. And 4 minutes later, Tracy Chapman isn't unknown anymore. Fast Car turned her into a global sensation overnight. A multi-platinum Grammy-winning folk hero, singing about poverty and revolution in an era obsessed with gloss and synthesizers. And for a minute, it felt like the world had finally made room for a voice that raw, that real, that uncompromising.
They had me waiting in the wings because the schedule wasn't entirely set. I think it was pretty much in order for all of the major acts who were scheduled to play, but they were just thinking they would slot me in.
But here's the thing about Tracy Chapman. She gave us the songs. Then, she walked away from the spotlight before it could swallow her whole. No scandal, no breakdown, no tearful comeback tour begging for attention. Just a woman who decided fame didn't own her, who fought Nicki Minaj in court for $450,000 over a song she never cleared, who let Alice Walker tell the world about their love while she stayed silent, and who became the first black songwriter to win a CMA award in 2023 without ever stepping foot on that Nashville stage. This is the story of Tracy Chapman, the legend who proved you can win by refusing to play the game.
It was exciting, of course, and scary. I had all these moments, these first moments of playing for bigger audiences. I'd started out playing in coffee houses and street performing.
Before the game, before the Grammy stages and courtroom battles, and the world deciding what Tracy Chapman owed them, there was Cleveland in the 1970s, a city on fire with racial tension, a little black girl on a school bus, and rocks hitting metal. Tracy was born March 30th, 1964, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Back then, Cleveland was in the middle of forced school integration, which sounds like progress on paper until you remember that progress for black kids in America has always come with a price. Tracy got bussed out to predominantly white neighborhoods every morning, and some mornings folks stood on the corners waiting, shouting slurs, throwing rocks at the bus windows while teachers tried to keep everyone calm and kids pressed their faces to the glass, trying not to cry. She later said those years taught her that education was her way out, not just out of poverty, but out of a world that wanted to keep her small, keep her scared, keep her in her place. Music became the other escape, a guitar in her hands, words on paper, melodies that let her say what the world wouldn't let her speak out loud. By the time she earned a scholarship to Tufts University in Massachusetts in the early 1980s, she wasn't just studying anthropology and African studies. She was studying survival, studying what it meant to be black and broke and brilliant in a country that only wanted one of those things from you. She started performing in Boston coffee houses, small rooms with mismatched chairs and dim yellow light, open mic nights where most people half listened over cheap coffee and conversation. But when Tracy stepped onto those tiny stages and started singing about dead-end jobs and fast cars and revolutions that hadn't happened yet, the rooms got quiet. One of those songs was Fast Car, a story she'd been carrying since watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, since seeing neighbors trapped in cycles they couldn't break, since riding those Cleveland buses and realizing some people never get to leave. A fellow Tufts student heard her play it one night, passed her demo to a music publishing contact, and suddenly, people in actual offices were listening. By 1987, Elektra Records took a chance on a black woman with an acoustic guitar singing about dead-end jobs and revolution. And nobody, not even Tracy, knew she was about to walk onto the biggest stage in the world. April 1988, Elektra released Tracy Chapman, and the album started moving the way good folk records moved back then. Slow, steady, college radio to word of mouth. People passing tapes to friends saying, "You have to hear this." Fast Car had that quiet pull, the kind of song that didn't scream for attention, but somehow made you stop what you were doing and listen. But quiet doesn't break through in an industry built on noise, and by early June the album was still climbing, still building, still waiting for that one moment that could change everything. June 11th, 1988, Wembley Stadium in London. 70,000 people packed in for the Nelson Mandela 70th birthday tribute. Cameras beaming the concert to hundreds of millions across the globe. This was the kind of event where legends performed, where Stevie Wonder and Whitney Houston and Dire Straits took the stage and reminded the world what power looked like. Tracy Chapman was on the lineup, sure, but she was supposed to be a side note, a brief interlude between the headliners. Then Stevie Wonder's keyboard wouldn't turn on. Backstage turned into chaos, stagehands scrambling, techs yelling into radios, producers panicking because you can't have dead air on a live global broadcast. Someone made a call. Send out Tracy Chapman. Just her, just the guitar, just fill the time until they fix the equipment. She walked out onto that massive stage alone. No backup band, no choreography, no safety net. Just a quiet black woman in a simple dark jacket with a story about a car and a dream that wouldn't come true. She started playing Fast Car, and 70,000 people who came for spectacle got truth instead. 4 minutes later, everything changed. The phones at Elektra started ringing, record stores couldn't keep the album in stock, and Tracy Chapman moved roughly 1 million copies in the next 2 weeks. By August, Fast Car hit number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, climbing charts across Europe, Australia, everywhere the broadcast reached. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. The kind of lightning strike moment the industry spends millions trying to manufacture and almost never gets. The thing about lightning, though, is it doesn't ask permission, and it doesn't care if you're ready. Tracy Chapman wasn't chasing fame. She'd been chasing a way to tell stories that mattered, to sing about the Cleveland bus rides and the single mothers and the people the world kept stepping over. But now, the world was watching, and watching meant expectations, meant pressure, meant a machine that wanted to turn her quiet revolution into something it could package and sell. Truth doesn't care about fame, but fame has a way of drowning out everything else. February 1989, the 31st Grammy Awards, and Tracy Chapman walked into that room knowing she didn't quite fit. The gowns, the glitter, the cameras flashing so fast you couldn't tell which direction to look. This was a world built for people who wanted to be seen, and Tracy had spent her whole life trying to be heard. They called her name twice that night. Best New Artist, Best Contemporary Folk Album for Tracy Chapman. She stood at the podium holding those golden gramophones, answered questions in that soft, steady voice, and you could see it in her eyes. The gratitude was real, but so was the discomfort, the sense that this spotlight was never what she signed up for. The industry saw a superstar. Tracy saw a platform, and she knew exactly what she wanted to use it for. While other artists were chasing endorsement deals and magazine covers, she was showing up at Amnesty International concerts, playing benefits for human rights organizations, using her name to pull people into rooms where they'd have to hear about political prisoners and injustice and the things polite society liked to ignore. She performed talking about a revolution on stages that weren't designed for glamour, just purpose, and those were the nights she looked alive, present, like the music mattered again. April 1989. Crossroads dropped, her sophomore album, and it was clear she wasn't interested in rewriting Fast Car over and over to keep radio happy. The songs were still political, still personal, still stripped down in a way that felt like resistance against an industry pumping out overproduced pop. It sold respectably, but the numbers weren't explosive, and you could feel the label's tension, the unspoken question hovering in every meeting. When are you going to give us the next big single? Tracy's answer, delivered in interviews with that same quiet firmness, was always some version of the same thing. She draws a line between her public work life and her personal life, and she's going to keep them separate. No gossip, no tabloid drama, no playing the celebrity game. Interviewers would push, trying to crack the door open into who she loved or where she lived or what she did when the cameras weren't rolling, and she'd shut it down politely but completely. It drove the media wild. Here was this woman the world wanted to know, and she kept saying no. Tracy Chapman understood something a lot of artists don't figure out until it's too late. Fame is a transaction, and if you're not careful, you'll trade everything that made your work matter for the attention the work brought you. She wasn't willing to make that trade. That unwillingness wasn't empty. It was full of decisions the industry didn't want to hear. 1992. Matters of the Heart arrived, and it was exactly what Tracy Chapman wanted to make. Introspective, quiet, uncompromising. No radio-ready singles engineered to climb the charts, no guest features to pull in crossover audiences. Just her voice and her guitar, and songs about love and loss that felt more like journal entries than pop confections. The album peaked at number 53 on the Billboard 200, and in industry terms, that number told a story of decline, of momentum lost, of an artist who'd squandered her moment. But Tracy wasn't squandering anything. She was choosing art over algorithm, choosing honesty over hype, choosing to protect what mattered even if it cost her what the world thought she should want. The 90s radio landscape was shifting hard. Grunge was exploding out of Seattle. Hip-hop was becoming the dominant cultural force. R&B was getting slicker and more produced, and a black woman with an acoustic guitar singing about matters of the heart didn't fit any format programmers knew what to do with. Labels could have pushed her to adapt, to collaborate with hot producers, to chase trends. Tracy said no. She also started saying no to a lot of other things. Fewer interviews, fewer press tours, fewer of the celebrity appearances that keep artists in the public eye when they're not on the charts. When other musicians were licensing their songs for commercials and films and samples, Tracy's team was building a reputation for being difficult to clear. She controlled her catalog with an iron grip, denying requests that didn't align with her vision, protecting her work like it was sacred because to her, it was. Studio executives didn't understand it. There'd be conference calls where they'd pitch ideas, a duet with this artist, a remix with that producer, a single that could get her back on pop radio. And Tracy would listen politely, thank them for their input, and keep making exactly the kind of music she wanted to make. To the industry, it looked like self-sabotage. To Tracy, it looked like survival, because she'd watched enough artists get chewed up by the machine to know that the only way to stay whole was to stay in control. The whispers started around then, the quiet industry gossip that follows any artist who won't play ball. Difficult, reclusive, washed up, done. Radio moved on. MTV moved on. The spotlight shifted to newer faces willing to do whatever it took to stay lit. And Tracy Chapman kept writing songs in rooms where nobody was watching, kept showing up for causes she believed in, kept drawing that line between her work and her life, and daring anyone to cross it. November 1995. New Beginning dropped, and right from the opening track, you could hear she'd evolved. This wasn't the sparse coffeehouse folk of the debut. This was blues-inflected, electric, warmer, and rougher around the edges in a way that felt earned. The centerpiece was Give Me One Reason, a song built on a rolling blues riff, and a lyric about someone begging you to stay when you've already got one foot out the door. It was simple, direct, undeniable, and it caught fire. By early 1996, Give Me One Reason was climbing the Hot 100, eventually peaking at number 3 and becoming her biggest US hit since Fast Car. Radio couldn't ignore it. MTV played the video, and suddenly Tracy Chapman was back in rooms she'd walked away from years earlier, except this time she knew exactly how temporary the invitation was. The album hit number 4 on the Billboard 200. The awards came rolling in, including another Grammy, this time for Best Rock Song. And the industry exhaled, relieved that she could still deliver when she wanted to. But here's the thing. Tracy didn't come back to prove anything to them. She came back to prove something to herself, to show that she could make music on her terms and still move people, still chart, still matter. The studio sessions for Give Me One Reason had that energy. Warm tube amps humming, her voice slightly rougher and more assured than it was in '88. The confidence of someone who'd survived the machinery and come out intact. She wasn't chasing the spotlight this time. She was borrowing it for a minute, using it, and then putting it back down. She toured selectively, played benefits for the causes she cared about, kept doing the work that mattered while declining the work that didn't. The same boundaries she'd set in the early 90s were still there, maybe even firmer now that she knew what saying yes to everything could cost. The 2000s came, and Tracy Chapman did what she'd been doing all along. She kept making music, just quieter, just further from the center of the noise. 2000 brought Telling Stories. 2002 gave us Let It Rain. 2005 dropped Where You Live. And 2008 closed with Our Bright Future. 4 albums across 8 years, each one thoughtful and crafted and completely ignored by mainstream radio. Each one charting lower than the last in a country that had moved on to auto-tune and reality TV stars, and whatever was loud enough to cut through the digital chaos. But Tracy wasn't chasing charts anymore. She was chasing something closer to peace, making records because she had things to say, not because the industry demanded product. She'd show up occasionally, always on her terms. A benefit concert for the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, an intimate theater packed with activists and advocates instead of Instagram influencers. A one-off TV performance here and there, a duet with Bonnie Raitt for a cause that mattered. Appearances at Make Poverty History and AmFAR fundraisers where the work was the point, not the publicity. These weren't comeback attempts. They were reminders that she'd never left. She'd just stopped performing for people who couldn't tell the difference between presence and celebrity. But the internet hates a vacuum, and Tracy Chapman's silence became a canvas for everyone else's theories. YouTube videos started popping up with thumbnails screaming about how she disappeared, how she got blackballed for refusing to participate in vague industry rituals, how her withdrawal was punishment for not playing the game. None of it was backed by actual reporting. None of it came from credible sources. But that didn't stop it from spreading, because a conspiracy is always more exciting than the truth. And the truth was just that a woman chose her sanity over stardom. Then, in the early 2000s, another story surfaced. This one real, but just as private. Author Alice Walker, in promoting a memoir drawn from her journals, spoke publicly about a romantic relationship she'd had with Tracy Chapman back in the early 90s, calling her one of her great loves and describing how Chapman's voice had opened something deep in her. Walker talked about it on camera, in interviews, with warmth and candor, while Tracy, true to form, said absolutely nothing. No confirmation, no denial, no statement. Just the same boundary she'd been holding for 3 decades. My work is public. My life is mine. It's wild how the world tries to fill in what you won't give it. The rumors, the theories, the think pieces trying to decode her absence like it was some kind of riddle instead of a choice. Tracy Chapman was living in San Francisco, making music when she felt like it, showing up for causes she believed in, and refusing to explain herself to people who'd already decided what her story should be. In 2018, Tracy Chapman reminded everyone she'd never really gone anywhere. She'd just been waiting for someone to cross the line. That line got crossed, and Tracy took out her pen and signed her name to a lawsuit. Here's what happened. Nicki Minaj was working on her album, Queen, and she wanted to interpolate Baby Can I Hold You, one of the intimate ballads from Tracy's 1988 debut, for a track called Sorry, featuring Nas. Minaj's team did what they were supposed to do. They reached out to Chapman's representatives, asked for permission to use the song. Chapman's answer was clear and final: no. But Minaj recorded it anyway. She and Nas laid down the track in the studio, and even though it didn't make the official album, the song started circulating, played for radio DJs, leaked online, living in that gray space between private creation and public distribution. And that's when Tracy Chapman reminded the industry that quiet doesn't mean soft, and private doesn't mean powerless. October 2018, Chapman filed a federal copyright infringement lawsuit, alleging that Minaj had used her work without authorization and then let it spread beyond the studio walls. The case got messy fast, with legal arguments swirling around fair use and creative experimentation versus an artist's right to control their catalog. In September 2020, a district court judge handed Minaj a partial win, ruling that creating the song in the studio was fair use. Artists should be able to experiment, to try things out, to see if an idea works before committing. But the case didn't end there. The question of distribution, of how the song got out into the world after Chapman had said no, that was still on the table. And in December 2020, Nicki Minaj agreed to settle. $450,000 paid to Tracy Chapman to make the whole thing go away. The news broke publicly in January 2021, and the message was unmistakable. You can sample the culture, you can experiment in private, but if you cross Tracy Chapman after she's told you no, it's going to cost you. The settlement wasn't just about money, it was about power, about a woman who'd spent decades being told she was too difficult, too protective, too unwilling to let the industry do what it wanted with her work, proving that difficult is just another word for I know my value. Tracy Chapman had been saying no since 1992, turning down samples and licenses and requests that didn't align with her vision, and every time someone questioned it, she held the line. April 2023, 35 years after Wembley, Fast Car came roaring back, this time in the voice of a white country singer named Luke Combs. His cover was straightforward, respectful, stripped down in a way that honored the original, and it exploded across formats: country radio, pop playlists, TikTok videos, everywhere. The song climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, topped the country charts, and suddenly a whole new generation was discovering Tracy Chapman through a genre that had spent decades keeping black artists at arm's length. And Tracy, still quiet, still private, still letting the work speak. November 8th, 2023, the Country Music Association Awards in Nashville, all glitter and sequins and cowboy hats, and Luke Combs is sitting in the audience when they announce Song of the Year. The cameras cut to him, cut to the stage, and then the presenter starts reading a statement from Tracy Chapman, who is not in the building, who sent words instead of showing up, who made history from a distance. She became the first black songwriter to win CMA Song of the Year, the first black woman with a sole songwriting credit on a #1 country hit, breaking barriers in a genre that never invited her to the table in the first place. The contrast is almost poetic. Wembley, 1988, an accidental solo performance that launched her into the spotlight. Nashville, 2023, an intentional absence while her song crosses a finish line she was never supposed to reach. Both moments, she was in control. One stepping into the light when called, the other choosing to stay in the shadows while the work shines. Because here's the legacy Tracy Chapman built. She made songs that outlasted the hype cycle, that survived format changes and industry shifts and decades of people trying to box her in or write her off. Fast Car is on Rolling Stone's list of the greatest songs ever written. Her activism with Amnesty International and AIDS organizations helped shift how artists thought about using fame for justice. Her relationship with Alice Walker, now part of the public conversation through Walker's own words, adds another layer to her story without requiring Tracy to explain herself. And her $450,000 settlement with Nicki Minaj stands as proof that protecting your catalog isn't paranoia, it's power. She still lives in San Francisco, still guards her privacy like it's oxygen, still lets the songs do the talking. The world wanted more interviews, more albums, more access, more explanation for why she wouldn't play the game. Tracy gave them enough. The songs, the truth, the blueprint for what it looks like when a black woman refuses to be owned by the industry that made her famous. Because Tracy Chapman's story isn't about what the world took from her. It's about what she refused to give away, and how a woman with a guitar and a backbone made sure that 35 years later, when Fast Car finally crossed every line the industry ever drew, she was still the one holding the pen.